Health Promotion and Disease Prevention Split Track session. And we are going to be listening in on a session called Access to Capital Through the Pandemic and Beyond, Native CDFIs. And Mr. Jackson Brossy, I'm going to go ahead and read through a little bit of some of your credentials here. It says that you're a member of the Navajo Nation with several years experience in management, federal advocacy, nonprofits, and private consulting. Having grown up in the Navajo Nation, he knows firsthand the need for access to capital for Native entrepreneurs and has devoted much of his professional life to advancing opportunities for Native American economic development. Prior to leading the Native CDFI network, he headed federal affairs and relations for the Navajo Nation in Washington, D.C. Brossy has also worked for the National Congress of American Indians and specialized in economic development policy. He holds a bachelor's degree from Stanford University, where he studied economics, statistics, and public policy. He earned a master's degree in public policy from the Harvard Kennedy School of Government, where he studied business and government policy. So we just want to welcome you, Mr. Brossy, today, and thank you for presenting for us. I'm going to go ahead and give you access to share your screen. You should be able to see that there coming up shortly.
Okay. Well, great. Okay, it works. Well, I'll start off before sharing my screen. So first off, I want to say thank you to USET for inviting me. The biggest part of my background in my bio that I'm most proud of is I'm a husband and father to two wonderful boys, and that commitment to them and creating a better world and environment for them as young Native people is important to me, and is part of the reason I'm here today, to create a better world for Native folks. And appreciate what USET is doing. USET has been a great leader in Indian country for quite a long time before I began involved here, obviously, and it will continue. So hello and thank you in the Navajo language. If we have any of my Navajo friends and family or other Navajos on the East Coast, and I promise that'll be the last time you'll hear some Navajo on this East USET call. With that, I will share my screen. Well, I'm excited to be here to talk about Native CDFIs, and I'm always excited to talk about Native CDFIs. And so if you, I'm assuming that the folks here either have an idea of what a CDFI is, or some of them don't, or some of them want to know a bit more. So I want to start with the basics of what a CDFI is. And in most cases, well, CDFI stands for Community Development Financial Institution, a CDFI. And we want to break that down into the Native CDFIs serve a particular group within this segment, and that's Native American folks. And so that is something that I think is square in the realm of USET. And Native CDFIs are segmented in different areas. However, the vast majority are not for-profit lending institutions. And that means that most of them, lending is what they do, and they do not take deposits, and therefore they are not regulated as a bank. That gives Native CDFIs and these minority lending institutions it's a hand up, not a handout, and an opportunity to do things that a lot of banks cannot. And so that's one of the attractive things about having a Native CDFI in your neck of the woods, or being able to work with one, is that they may be able to do loans that banks are not willing to, in smaller loans or loans to folks that are otherwise quote unquote unbankable. And I think everybody in Indian country knows that there are lots of reasons for the challenges that we face when it comes to banking, access to banking in Indian country. And these challenges go back a long time. And I think the current conversation around residential schools and BIA schools is also tied to that. That's how long and how far back this the challenge and the root of the challenge of access to banking and access to capital in Indian country goes. And so it's good that the country is turning their eyes toward it, and good that the Secretary of the Interior is turning her eyes toward this. And we think that in the long run, we want our people and our next generation to have the financial tools, financial education, and access to capital that we need and we should have to not only survive and strive, but to thrive in our communities. And that's what Native CDFIs are doing. So also I want to thank a few other folks, Rebecca Narragon, who's been active with Native CDFIs and been a great representative of USET as an organization. Moving forward, let me tell a bit about our organization, the Native CDFI Network. We are an advocacy member organization, and we are made for Native CDFIs, governed by Native CDFIs, specifically for Native community development financial institution leaders. We were formed in 2009 to unify Native CDFIs that work in trust lands and off-trust lands in Native communities, whether they're American Indian communities, Alaska Native communities, Native Hawaiian communities. And our mission is to be the national voice and advocate that strengthens and promotes Native CDFIs. And we want to create access to capital and resources to Native peoples across the country. And so I'm proud to say that our members are diverse and cover a really broad area. And here's a quick map that the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis put together a couple of years ago that highlights the places that Native CDFIs serve, back in late 2017. Since then, we've had some mergers in the field and some new CDFIs popping up, as well as a few that unfortunately are no longer there because of the lack of funding and lack of support back in 2017. As I will get to in a bit, the support and real opportunity for Native CDFIs is stronger than it ever has been since the beginning of the Native CDFI movement about 20 years ago. While we're here on this page, I think you'll notice that unfortunately there are not that many Native CDFIs on the East Coast. And I think this is something that hopefully if you're here, you can work with us and work with me and work with other Native CDFI leaders to increase the number of dots or the access to capital and technical assistance that Native CDFIs provide in the Eastern region. I want to acknowledge the Sequoia Fund, who is a really strong Native CDFI operating out of Eastern Band of Cherokee in Western North Carolina. They are headed up by Russ Siegel, and he's also a member of the board of the Native CDFI Network. They are doing incredible things. They have been entrusted by their tribal leaders to help manage a lot of the economic stimulus funds, both through CARES and now ARPA. And that is a really great tool for their community to provide resources to Native entrepreneurs in their areas. You'll see also on the map that our Seneca brothers and sisters, they have a Native CDFI in their area, and they're doing great things. And then up in Maine, Four Directions is another great example of a Native CDFI doing great things in their community. Four Directions in Maine is a leader when it comes to housing and housing finance and home buyer training for Native people. And they are a CDFI that is not only looked at by other Native CDFIs, but also in the broader CDFI community. So again, to provide folks a bit more background about who native CDFIs are. So there are 69 Treasury certified community development financial institutions that work with native communities, the majority. And as you see here, they're all across the country. Our members operate in 27 states, whether it's from Maine to Texas to Oklahoma, Michigan, Arizona, California, Hawaii, and Alaska, and in between. So we're really proud of what they're doing. And right now we're in a position where this industry is growing. And that's one of the things I want to talk about. One other quick framing point that we wanted to talk about was that when it comes to access to capital and lending, these nonprofit lenders operate in three primary buckets. The first is small business and micro business lending. So that is if you or your family member wants to start up a lawn mowing / gardening company and you need a loan to buy some equipment, native CDFIs should be, if there is one in your neck of the woods, you should go talk with them. If you are an ag lender, if an agriculture producer, that falls in this category, and there's an excellent native CDFI ag lender named Akitan out of South Dakota that works, is expanding this footprint. So this small micro business is one segment. The second segment I wanted to talk about are home lending and home buyership, home ownership, and native CDFIs that focus in that area. And so Four Directions from Maine is an excellent example of one. There are a number of others across the country that are helping put native people in homes and not through means outside of TDHEs primarily, and they're helping people that otherwise might not qualify for low-income housing buy these homes if they're in between getting a loan from a bank versus working with a TDHE, and they're able to help out that market of folks who really need homes but might not qualify for those programs because of a variety of reasons. And then the third segment that native CDFIs offer when it comes to access to capital is consumer finance, and that is individual people that want to get a loan to consolidate their debt. Individual people, I think we all might have people in our families that are struggling with credit card debt, and really were not given the opportunity and training when they were young in their families, in their household, or in their school to be ready to tackle and understand the challenges that one faces when they sign up for a credit card. And that, I think, as a lot of us know, can snowball and become a real big problem and harm not only the amount of money we owe to creditors, but also harm our credit score. And so that is a wonderful, this third segment of consumer finance and credit building that a lot of native CDFIs do, not all native CDFIs do, but a lot do, is very important. And I encourage, if you are interested in learning more, to learn more about that segment. There are a number of tools out there. Many of our members are also members of a group called the Credit Building Alliance, who allows folks to get debt consolidation loans and report these loans as small microloans that they then pay every single month to increase their credit score. And they're great examples. We have some friends in the Tiwa lending services out of New Mexico that have testified in front of the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs that said that they were able to increase people's credit scores by 200 points, and they were able to provide free credit training and then eventually use that increased credit score to get people in homes that otherwise wouldn't. So really great things that these native CDFIs are doing, and really glad you all are focusing on them. And I want to keep folks, I guess, interested. I'm okay if you have a burning question and you want to drop it in the chat. I'm okay with that. I think otherwise we have some time at the end that we want to allow folks to talk about. So really quickly, I want to acknowledge our board of directors. We've got a great, I mentioned earlier, we are for Native Community Development Financial Institutions by Native Community Development Financial Institutions. Our board of directors are really strong leaders in this industry who work in each one of those three segments, whether it's consumer, whether it's home ownership, or whether it's small and micro businesses. And so I'm going to go through each one of these board of directors really quickly, but Pete Upton is our board chair. He works out of Nebraska, and he operates the Native 360 Loan Fund. He's also a member of the Ponca tribe of Nebraska, and really great leader who built up his Native CDFI from the ground up, and they serve 3 different states now. Fern Ori is our vice chairperson. She's out of Wisconsin, and she's actually going to be transitioning to working with the OESTA Corporation, which is another large Native CDFI that provides access to capital for Native CDFIs. And happy to talk or connect you with any folks over there. They're also a great resource for if you are considering starting a Native CDFI in your community. They have a lot of resources, and they've done a lot of work in that area. Cindy Logson, who works with the Citizen Potawatomi Community Development Corporation, another great CDFI that is a tribal CDFI. I forgot to get into the distinction, but there are tribal Native CDFIs, and there are independent 501c3 Native CDFIs, and there are a couple bank CDFIs and a couple credit union CDFIs. The Citizen Potawatomi Community Development Corporation is a great example of a tribal CDFI that is chartered by the tribe, and where the leadership and management is appointed by the tribe and also supported monetarily by the tribe. In contrast with the majority of 501c3 Native CDFIs, which are independent nonprofits with majority of Native folks on their board, but are not necessarily part of the tribal government. But Citizen Potawatomi is one of the larger Native CDFIs out there. I want to say that they're doing millions of dollars in business and really able to help their tribe take advantage of funding at ARPA, through ARPA and through CARES. And the Cindy Middlestats from Alaska works with the Bristol Bay Native Corporation, so that's another interesting aspect. Cora May Haskell works with the Four Bands Community Fund out of South Dakota. Natalie Charlie is with the Tala Fund, and she's actually stepping down pretty soon. And Russ Siegel, I mentioned earlier, with the Sequoia Fund out of North Carolina. Robin Danners with the Native Homestead Loan Fund in Hawaii, and Christopher Coburn is with the Muskogee Loan Fund out of Oklahoma. And I don't see, hopefully I'm not missing any questions in the chat. But one thing we wanted to talk about briefly was some of the benefits of creating a CDFI is you could have access to a number of federal incentives and programs that aren't necessarily for Native CDFIs, but you can get a leg up in accessing some of these. So first off, I guess I'll start with the Treasury. So the Treasury certifies Native CDFIs, and they're the ones who've created this designation. They have a Native American CDFI assistance program, and through that program, Native CDFI can get access to grants. They have an annual grant cycle, and you can apply for a grant to provide technical assistance to help start a Native CDFI, which is how a lot of Native CDFIs get started, through this technical assistance grant, and also investment from tribal governments and not-for-profits. They also, through NACA, they also have funding to provide lending capital and financial assistance once your CDFI is certified. So they are really the first stop where Native CDFIs go. Our members are interested in new market tax credits. Unfortunately, in new market tax credits, if you're not aware, are these great instruments to provide outside third-party money to do investments and build things in low-income areas. And so you think that this should be aligned with Indian country, and this should align with economic development and health opportunities and everything. Unfortunately, the way the new market tax credit program has worked in historically is less than 1% of the funding through, which is $5 billion a year, which is $5 billion is a lot of money. Less than 1% of that is going to Indian country. And there hasn't been a single native CDFI who's gotten a piece of this for, I want to say, 4 years, maybe going on 5, which is mind-boggling. I don't want to talk about opportunity zones but the BIA has a loan guarantee fund, and they also have a lesser known bond loan insurance fund that a lot of native CDFIs take advantage of, where they are able to insure loans that they make to small businesses under $250,000. And so this is something that you don't have to be a native CDFI to access, but it's something that a lot of native CDFIs use and use well to make sure that they are covered. The Small Business Administration has a microloan program that some native CDFIs use, but a lot do not, and we can talk about that. Our members work with HUD, and our members also work with the USDA. And right now we're working with the USDA to expand a pilot out in South Dakota for a direct home loan program called the 502 Direct Loan Program. Our members are, as a trade organization, our members are very much engaged in advocacy. We want to increase appropriations for the Native American community CDFI programs, and we want to increase new market tax credits and allocations to native CDFIs, as I noted. Another great tool that our members use is the Community Reinvestment Act. And this is a law that Congress passed in 1977 that makes or provides incentives for banks to quote unquote reinvest in their communities, communities that are underserved, and really minority communities and native communities in particular should be a part of this. And so our organization, the Native CDFI Network, has been very much engaged on what they're calling community reinvestment, CRA modernization. We want to make sure that banks have increased incentives to invest in Indian country, and specifically banks should get some credit if they want to lend long-term, low-cost funds to native CDFIs, so that native CDFIs can then relend at a lower rate than the micro entrepreneurs or homeowners or individual consumers can get otherwise. And so this is very much an ongoing process, modernizing the Community Reinvestment Act. And in the past, it's something that, like new market tax credits, has really sidestepped Indian country, and really, so therefore there's a lot of opportunity. So I'm really excited about that. We want to increase loan guarantee opportunities with the Bureau of Indian Affairs. In addition to their insurance program, the loan guarantee program is often oversubscribed. And I know that if you are somebody who wanted to get a loan from them, there's a cycle, there's a lot of uncertainty whether all the loan pool is used up. And that is really a disincentive to working with that program. And we want to fix that and make sure that those disincentives are mitigated, and that anyone and everyone in Indian country that has a good business idea is able to get funding for that, so long as they're able to prove that the idea works. And whether that is through this loan guarantee fund, whether that is through partnering with banks to get low-cost, long-term patient capital with the Community Reinvestment Act eligible projects, or whether that's with new market tax credits, all of the above is things that native CDFIs are interested in. And if you are someone who wants to start one, it's something, there are areas of opportunity for you to go down. Our members are also engaged with HUD. And if you read the Wall Street Journal yesterday, I think there was a good article on the Section 184 loan program. And if you're not familiar with that, the Section 184 loan program is a program to provide loan guarantees for home ownership, both on trust land and off trust land. And unfortunately, this program is complicated, and it's so complicated that all the major banks no longer work with that Section 184 loan program. There are a couple Native CDFI banks that do, including Native American Bank, who's one of our members, and they're a great organization out of Denver. The Chickasaw Nation has a bank, and I believe they do a lot of 184 lending, and there are a couple other private companies that do 184 lending. But we want to make, one of the things we're advocating on is making sure that barriers to entry for Native CDFIs to be that 184 lender are all brought down. And so again, getting back to our goal of making sure that if you want a loan and you can handle a loan and you have the training for it, for micro businesses, consumer, or you're building a home or buying a home, that you should be able to get one. And that's where Native CDFIs are moving, and that's where we're going. Which takes us to the pandemic and in health. And I think probably everybody here has had a rough and challenging year and a half. I know my family has when it comes to the pandemic, and as the beginning of the pandemic particularly was challenging and stressful, and for everyone individually. I know the tribes for sure, but also for Native CDFIs. And so we put together a report around the impact of the pandemic on these community development financial institutions serving Indian country. And as you'll recall, in the beginning, there was a lot of hesitant. There were a lot of challenges, problems, and uncertainty in the beginning, especially when it came to folks that did lending, and especially when it came to Native CDFIs, because our members are lending to people that don't have great credit backgrounds, or we're lending to people that might not be banked with big lenders, and we're lending to people who the big banks are turning down because they don't have enough money in their account and they don't have a great track record of repayment. And so our members were on the front line of the lending crisis when it came to pandemic, and our members were scared. Fortunately, we're happy to say that now, a year and a half later, lending has increased, and now demand for loans from Native CDFIs is at a higher level than it has been in the past. We've also been really active with Congress, and we worked to secure $55 million a bump in the allocation for the Native American CDFI Assistance Fund. So that's the largest amount of money that's ever gone, that's gone through that program for Native CDFIs ever. So we're really happy about that. Wanted to highlight a few of our friends that we also highlight in this report. We work a lot with the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis, their Center for Indian Country Development, and they're led by a great guy named Casey Lazar. And we had a number of conversations with him and his team around a number of different topics, including Community Reinvestment Act, modernization, and he says not only do Native CDFIs provide the capital needed to expand the private sector in tribal communities, their financial services allow community members to live and thrive in their homelands. And we're really happy and proud of their support. The National Congress of American Indians, so we have their president, Fawn Sharp, talking about our organization and Native CDFIs in particular, and the great things that they're doing. Folks like Russ, folks like Four Directions, Susan Hammond recently stepped down from there, but they continue to move forward and really doing a great job. And then we had Brian Newland from the Department of Interior, is very much a fan, and we appreciate his support for Native CDFIs as well. We were also able to get some great support from folks like Congresswoman Sharice Davids, who interestingly enough, one of her many, I guess, hats that she wore, and also kind of the great example of her work in Indian country and her really stout support for Indian country. She worked in South Dakota with a community development corporation that worked alongside Native CDFIs and helped provide access funding for these Native CDFIs. And so she knows what Native CDFIs do. She's a great ally of our organizations, and she's been a great ally in a lot of the policy pieces that we have put forward, including increasing access to capital through Treasury appropriations. And so she's been huge. And as has Chris James from the National Center for the American Indian Enterprise Development. So if you've been to RES, hopefully, if you're interested, Chris is the leader and CEO of that organization. He comes also from the Eastern, he's a member of the Eastern Band in Cherokee. He worked at Sequoia Fund quite a while back, and working with that CDFI, he was able to also work with the Treasury Department and their CDFI fund and the SBA, and then now at NCAIED. So he's someone that we're happy to have champion Native CDFIs, and also someone who, like Representative Davids, knows Native CDFIs, what they do day to day, and also the challenges that they face, and therefore also, I think, the value. So we're really proud to have some strong advocates and supporters. Cool. I do not see any questions yet. I want to also highlight a great opportunity. Hopefully you're interested in Native CDFIs. Hopefully you're interested in learning more, whether you are a practitioner yourself, whether you are someone who works in economic development, whether you are a tribal leader who says, hey, I see that there are 69 of these Treasury certified organizations across the country. There are funding opportunities, whether they are federal or through the CDFI fund, whether they are private, through banks or not-for-profits, or whether they're an investment that the tribal government wants to invest in. This is something I want to learn a bit more about. We have our annual meeting. It's going to be in November in Washington, D.C. We're also working on a hybrid option. Obviously, there are challenges with meeting in person, and I guess stay tuned. But for now, we plan to meet at the National Indian Gaming Association's office. The entrance is, I think, affordable, hopefully, and we encourage folks to meet with us. We also encourage you to go to our website, and if you're interested, sign up for our newsletter. We have periodic phone calls. One that will be coming up that we will be announcing soon will be around the State Small Business Credit Initiative, and this is $500 million that is set aside for Indian country to provide loans to small businesses. And to put that in perspective, $500 million for loans to small businesses versus $16 million is what Native CDFIs get in a given year. Historically, $500 million will be a huge boon. There are deadlines coming up. September 16th is a deadline for your tribal government to raise their hand and say, I want to participate in this program. And it's non-binding. If you are at all interested, feel free to shoot me a note. We're going to have some folks from Treasury talking with us soon. We've had them talk with us in the past, and we're going to bring them back before the September 16th deadline for the letter of interest. And then there's a subsequent, I want to say, December deadline for that organization to put together their plan for how to use that funding, whether the plan is to reallocate that funding to a native CDFI that's doing good work. So if you want to, I haven't talked to Russ out in North Carolina, but maybe they want to, yeah, maybe somebody could allocate their funding there, and then they would be able to get additional funding out to small businesses. Or whether that's something that you want to start up for your tribe or your community, working with a tribal government. So there are a lot of things on our radar, I think, and I think everybody's radar right now. But we are doing our best, and we're making sure that native CDFIs have information up on it, and we encourage you to check us out. In getting back to our ultimate goal of having healthy, happy, and functioning families in Indian country. And financial health is something that we need to talk about, something that the policymakers need to talk about, and people needed to talk about back when residential schools were a thing. But here we are in the 21st century, and native CDFIs are strong, we're happy, and we are doing our best to talk about financial health, and we're doing our best to make sure that our next generation has the tools they need to succeed and thrive. So with that, I'd love to have a conversation with anybody who is interested in learning more. I'll throw my email into the chat afterward in case folks, I guess, don't feel comfortable asking any questions. So, oh yeah, and great. So thanks. And anyone who wants to take a look at the report about the impact of the pandemic on native CDFIs, where our members were working remotely, working from home, and really remarkably, despite all the challenges, we're able to keep paying the bills, we're able to keep their staff, and we're able to work with the people that they had lent money to say, hey, you've lost your job, we'll work with you to rewrite the terms of your loan so that we can defer payments if you need to until you get your feet back under you. We want to make sure that you are able to better your livelihood and your families. And so I encourage you to check out our report there in the link, or it's also if you go to nativecdfi.net, there'll be a link on the homepage to look at the report too. So thank you. And I want to see if there are any questions or anything we can chat about right now.
Thank you, Mr. Brossy. Any questions, anyone? If you want to, you can unmute or you can post them in the chat at this time. It's a great presentation.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I'm excited about what native CDFIs are doing. And like I said earlier, we're in an unprecedented time for these community development financial institutions. The fund that largely supports CDFIs was created 27 years ago. And it was about 25 years ago that the first native CDFI was started up in South Dakota. And since then, federal funding for these CDFIs has stayed relatively flat and stable and stagnant until this past year. Like I said, we've maxed out at about $16 million in regular appropriations. And so that's forced native CDFIs to go outside and talk with banks, talk with nonprofit foundations. So the Northwest Area Foundation is a really great foundation, is one of our funders. And they fund a lot of CDFIs in their Northwest footprint. Unfortunately, we haven't found that USET foundation with the USET footprint, but we want to find them, and we hopefully USET finds them so that they're able to help provide that access to capital and funding and really startup funds for these native CDFIs in the USET footprint to get off the ground. But there are a lot of friends, a lot of partners, a lot of allies out there, and a lot of resources. And so and we're looking forward to seeing numbers of allies and resources grow. I'm sure that there will be one or two more native CDFIs cropping up and growing in the next couple of years from in the USET region. And I'm looking forward to that. Cool. And I see a question from Kelly Hellman. I'm going to read it. So the National Financial Capability Study in 2015 showed that within Native American communities, females who often lead head of households on their own have many fewer financial skills and assets than do Native men. What initiatives are addressing this gender disparity? Awesome question, Kelly. Well, I haven't come across any initiatives that are specifically targeting this gender disparity. But that said, I think this is a good issue to point out that there is. I'd love to follow up with you, Kelly, on this. I will say that we want to work with folks like the Bureau of Indian Affairs and Bureau of Indian Education to make sure that financial literacy, financial education is something that every single child, whether they're boy or girl, and everything, however they identify, have the tools and the access to those tools, and not only access, but have the training and are trained when they go through the Bureau of Indian Education schools. Like I did, I went through a BIE school when I was a kid from kindergarten through fourth grade. And that's usually before financial literacy is taught. And it wasn't taught there, but one of our goals is to make sure that that's the case. But we look forward to finding others and partnering with other folks in foundations if they're interested to make sure that we target a training where it's needed. And if that's the case where we need additional focus here, then we want to partner with folks. So thanks. Cool. Awesome. So Rebecca has any knows even more, and this is much more specific to USET. So Sequoia Fund, they have a tribal program that targets youth. And actually, I remember that now. I think one of their board members is very active in this, and it should be on their website. Cool.
Awesome. Any more questions?